On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we preview KU basketball's final game before the Christmas break, taking on the Yale Bulldogs out of the Ivy League on Friday night.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere that you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. On today's edition of the show, we're previewing Kansas versus Yale. It is the penultimate non-conference game for KU basketball, their final game before the Christmas break. And we're going to be breaking down with the Yale Scouting Report, matchups of the game, players to watch, Hawks to soar for KU. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Gametime. So as far as the series history here, it's a brief series history. KU is, I believe, 3-0 all-time against Yale. Don't need to get too much into those, although they did beat Yale during their 07-08 national championship season. So I don't know, maybe a good omen there. As far as some of the top storylines coming into this game for KU, no Johnny Furphy. That's kind of a big one here, obviously. It was mentioned earlier this week by Bill Self that Furphy, this was something that they had already known about when they brought him in, that he had a family commitment that he needed to get out to. So obviously with the long travel back to Australia during, the Christmas break here, it's tough to basically, if he would have to leave on the 23rd and come back on the 25th or something like that. Like, that's such a short time. And I don't know what the family commitment is. Bill Self declined to answer, which I think is totally cool. I mean, just, it's a personal matter. Let it be personal. So anyway, with Johnny Furphy, he's not going to be there. And that does have implications on the game, certainly, because I think it gives an opportunity for some other players for KU. And I think to that notion, I want to lump this storyline with that one. You're continuing in some of these games, especially before you get to Big 12 play and before you get to the NCAA tournament later in the year, you're trying to develop your 5 through 9. You're trying to develop your 5th starter plus your 4 bench players. Well, in this game, without Johnny Furphy, that becomes developing your 5 through 8. And Furphy's playing just under 14 minutes per game right now, which means that there is enough minutes to go around for others that it could be interesting. Do the 14 minutes, do they go, an extra 2 to Kevin McCullough, an extra 4 of them go to El Marco Jackson, and then there's only 8 minutes to be divvied out, and maybe you play a little extra big basketball and 3 go to Parker Brown, only 5 end up in the hands of Timberlake and McDowell, and it's possible that it really isn't that much of a nudge or bump for either Jamari McDowell or Nick Timberlake in terms of minutes. Yeah, that is entirely possible. But I would like to think that of those 14 minutes you're losing in this game, that a majority of those will go to Nick Timberlake and or Jamari McDowell. Now, does one go to one guy over the other if they play well early? Do we see a 7-7 split with those minutes going to both those guys each to give them both kind of an extra leash? I think it'll be very interesting to see how that divvies out. And the reason why is because it's an extra opportunity, an extended opportunity when you don't really have another option for one of those guys. In the case of McDowell, it's more of you have shown some nice flashes. Do you earn more playing time? In the case of Timberlake, maybe the extra minutes is more in the standpoint of, hey, I have a longer leash now. And I think for some guys who come off the bench, it's one thing to come off the bench. And if you go 0 for 2 from 3, when your role is to be the shooter, that you're not going to come back out on the court as much, or if at all, again, because it's not your night, versus if you start 1 of 2 or 2 of 2, maybe you earn extra playing time. Whereas if you're a starter, you start 0 for 2 from 3, it's like, okay, I might get up 2, 3, 4 more 3-point attempts in the game. And mentally, I think that can mess with some guys. So for Timberlake, knowing in the back of his head, there is a higher floor, maybe a higher ceiling for the minutes played without Johnny Furphy. Maybe we see him be more comfortable in this game, and maybe if he has a more comfortable game, maybe this one can kind of get him going. We'll see. This is also the last game before your Christmas break. Players are going to head out after this game for a couple days back to each and everyone's respected homes, and they'll get to spend Christmas, a little bit of time with the family, then come back, I think, on like the 26th for KU, and then they'll get ready for their next game against Wichita State on the 30th. But this is always an interesting game, always a challenging game for trying not to look ahead, trying not to look too far, and trying to stay focused and not be focused on, hey, I'm ready to be out of here. I'm ready to go see my family. I'm ready for the Christmas break. We've seen games where things have not gone well for KU. I think Bill Self is 15-5 in the final game before Christmas break over the course of his time at KU. And at the media avail, it was funny because that was brought up to his attention from Gary Bedore of the Kansas City Star. And he was like, oh, it's a good record. You're 15-5. And Bill Self goes, oh, that's not a good record, which was hilarious because 15-5, 75% win percentage for a lot of teams is like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. For Bill Self, he's like, no, we got to be way better than 75%. But, some of the losses have been ugly. You think back to the Temple one about a decade ago where they were in Philly, lost by 20 plus points. They had the close loss at Villanova with the Doak team. They had a loss at Nevada. They had a loss at Arizona in the 08-09 year. They had the Arizona State loss on the road. And 3 or 4 of those were kind of big deficits in the games you faced. And you saw some of that. And even last year, like I do think it helps being at home, which KU is in this game, and maybe playing a lower opponent. But we saw last year against Harvard, another Ivy League team. KU ends up winning that one 68-54. So the margin looks fine in the end. But that was a 5-point game at the 10-minute mark remaining. So Harvard was in that game kind of to the final. Like I remember there was a run around the 4, 5, 6 minute mark of the game that KU kind of pulled away. Up until that point, Harvard was in the game. And that was kind of a game where maybe you were just ready to have the break. Now, the fact that it's a 1-game week, maybe that helps too here. I don't know. As far as the scouting report on Yale, they come in at 7-5 on the season. They're ranked just outside the top 100 on KenPom. They had a 15-point loss to a good Gonzaga team earlier in the year. That was the only game they've played against a top 100 KenPom opponent to this point. They are 2-2 against teams in that 100 to 150 range. They have a top 100 offense right now. And as far as what they do well on the offensive side of the court, they do not turn the ball over like at all. They don't get it stolen from them. They don't get shots blocked. So they don't lead to chaotic plays that are going to give you easy baskets at the other end or change the momentum of the game. They play smart and very, opposite of carefree on that end. Very tight and restricted and avoid you taking over the game there. They shoot free throws really well. They are above average from 3 on lower volume, but they have a bunch of guys that can get you on any given night, and it is scary, some of the three-point shooting. They also get a ton of shots at the rim, so they're able to use some of the spacing, some of the cutting they provide to get some easy buckets at the rim, plus they have a big 7-foot center who gets those easy buckets down there in the half court. What they don't do well on the offensive side of the court, they don't shoot twos overall at a great percentage. They have not been a good offensive rebounding team, though I think part of that is strategy. Get to that later. And they do not get to the free throw line very often. Defensive side of the ball, this is the weakness compared to the offense. They're in the 150 rankings on KenPom. What they do well on the defensive side of the ball, defensive rebounding. Good defensive rebounding team. They don't foul a ton, and they're above average at 2-point defense so far. What they don't do well on the defensive side of the ball, they do not force turnovers. They don't get steals. And so far, the 3-point defense has struggled for them. Teams are shooting really well from 3 against them. Now, as part of that, just bad luck on their part. And maybe the defense is going to end up better than where it's ranked now because that'll submerge at some point. Or is there something stylistic about what they do? They also do play at a very slow tempo, so maybe a slower game that can kind of lull you to sleep and be a little opposite of what KU wants to do. As far as the player personnel, mostly 6'4" to 6'6", 6'7", 6'8"-ish along the 1 through 4, kind of your normal size along there. And then they do have that 7-footer who plays a big majority of their minutes. They kind of have the Ivy League version of Hunter Dickinson. But the point guard, Ben Mabeng, it leads the team, 13.6 points per game. He also gets almost 5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, almost 2 steals per game. He's just a good player overall. He's shooting 44% from the field, only 26% from 3. So that doesn't necessarily scare you that much, but he is taking a ton of tries per game. That tells you that he has confidence in it. And the scary part about playing somebody like that is the beauty of it is he can shoot the other team out of the game. He can have like a 1 for 8 game from 3. The negative of playing that guy is if he happens to be hot that specific night, he's not going to stop taking them, and he could end up going 5 for 8 from 3 or something like that and keep him in it. He's also the team's top defender, according to Evan Miyakawa's website with defensive BPR. Danny Wolff is the big man for them, their Ivy League version of Hunter Dickinson. He gets 13.5 points, 9 rebounds per game. He's a good passer, 2 assists per game, and shoots it really well from all over the floor. 50% from the field, 48% from three-point range, and 74% at the foul line. So this should actually be a really good matchup for Hunter Dickinson. Then you have Matt Nolan and John Pulakidis, who are both wings, also average double digits per game. The shooting guard, August Mahoney, is at about 9 a game. Pulakidis and Mahoney are both over 40% from three on over 4 tries per game. So those are the guys you got to mark on the outside. Wolff will take threes too. And then, like I said, a high number of them, even though it hasn't been efficient from Mabang so far. All right, let's get to our matchups of the game. Players to watch, players that I think can have a big game for KU on this episode of the show. First, we are brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite sporting event should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for sporting events, music, comedy, and theater near you. They have killer deals and last-minute tickets with their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing. You can just start getting hyped for the event that you're going to be having, because that's what you should be doing with Gametime. The beauty of Gametime is they show you images of all the seats that you're going to be sitting in. You can even switch over to the stadium view, so you can see cheapest prices in maybe each section. Right now, I'm looking at Gametime, and you can get Section 9 tickets for $48. You can get Section 10 tickets for $49. Section 2A for $68. And if you use our promo code where you can snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Matchups of the game for Kansas versus Yale, 7 o'clock. Pregame will start at 5:30, all on KLWN and 105.9 KISS for the radio side of things. Number one is KU in the half court. So I mentioned earlier, Yale is not a very good offensive rebounding team. They don't really crash the glass hard. But this is more of a strategy thing to me, where you don't have as maybe athletic of a team as others. You want to play with the game in front of you. They don't really send a bunch of guys at the glass offensively. Instead, they try to send guys back, shots up, get back, prevent a transition bucket the other way, to try to avoid to give up those transition buckets. And in fact, they rank in the 79th percentile, according to College Basketball Analytics, CBB Analytics, in limiting the amount of points that the opposition scores in transition compared to all they score. That sounds very complicated. Point being this: they are one of the, top 21% teams in the country in limiting transition buckets, basically. They're giving up just over 7 points per game in transition. That's a low number. Kansas averaging about 12.5 per game. So I know that doesn't sound like a huge gap, like 5 points, but in a given game, that can be the difference of covering a spread. That can be the difference of winning, a close game by 5 versus winning by 10. That can be the difference between winning and losing, right? So basically, point being, KU is going to have more possessions in the half court in a slower tempo game with less transition, which means you have to execute, because Yale is going to try to make you do that. Maybe this isn't a worry. Maybe this shouldn't be a worry, because you have Hunter Dickinson, who having him on the block, that's the ultimate half-court offense. Just throw it to him down low, right? You should be fine with that. And that should mean KU kind of spams Hunter Dickinson in the post a good amount. Obviously, they have a 7-footer. How does that defend him? And to that notion, Yale is in the bottom 35% of the country. So Yale is basically in the bottom third of the country in preventing shots at the rim. So maybe not all of this from the center. Part of it could be players driving on some of their guards and stuff, but they've not done a fantastic job of preventing shots at the rim. What's going to be interesting, though, is how Yale plays this defensively. Do they play it like Indiana and Missouri did, where they basically sagged off of KJ Adams? Basically, you have an inherent double being put in the post on Hunter Dickinson, and then KJ needs to win in the half court, which he did in a lot of cases in both of those games. Number two, Kansas versus above the break threes from Yale. I mentioned this in the past. I think it was during the Missouri game. Kansas has done an above average job at preventing corner 3-point attempts, but they've given up a ton of threes above the break, the non-corner threes, right? Where things are kind of curving around, right? Only 4% of college basketball teams have even taken a higher rate of above the break threes to an opponent's defense than KU's. So KU is giving one of the, top 5% in terms of the amount of shots the teams are getting against their defense from above the break threes to anyone in the country. That's a lot. Is that intentional? I kind of think so. Some of it can be intentional that, hey, you have KJ Adams and Hunter Dickinson down low. It's going to be hard to drive on you, so they're going to have to take more threes. Some of it can be intentional in that, hey, we're fine with you taking above the break threes. We just want to prevent you from taking corner threes, which typically are the easier ones, right? There can be some intentionality to it. There can be some, maybe teams have just, found success there. I don't know. But teams have shot just 31.7% from three above the break against the KU defense. So, you'll take that as a defense. But that has been Yale's strength. Yale has only taken 33 corner threes this season compared to 163 threes above the break. And in those above the break threes, Yale is shooting 34.4%, which is better than their mark they're shooting from the corner. If styles make fights, that makes this actually a good style for the Yale offense. Number 3, KU preventing giving up extra possessions. Yale is not a great offensive rebounding team. Like I said earlier, I think some of that is style and what they're trying to do, and that leads to transition. But when they've been able to get offensive rebounds and turn what's been kind of a weakness into a strength or a neutral, that's allowed their strengths to speak out even more. They're grabbing 26% of their misses right now on the offensive side of the glass. In games where they get 32% of their misses or higher, they're 5-0. In games where it's below that, they're 2-5. Yale's also not a good turnover defense, so they don't get extra possessions. They don't prevent you from taking them. But same idea. Their top 5 games in turnover rate defensively, 5-0. The bottom 7, 2-5. So pretty much this. If you can allow them to get extra possessions, something they don't normally do well at, it's going to be problematic because they do well in a lot of other areas. But if you just play your game and you get the extra possessions or you prevent them from getting the extra possessions, you're going to be fine. As far as our player matchup, Hunter Dickinson versus Danny Wolff, it's the best matchup. 2 7+ footers, 2 guys who pass well from the post, 2 centers who shoot the ball well from 3. I think there are a lot of similarities here, but you feel like you have the better version of it, so go out and show it, but maybe a bit of a tougher matchup than some of these other games for Hunter Dickinson. One other one just of note, though, DeJuan Harris versus Ben McGang is probably the most important, even though Dickinson versus Wolff is probably the best. Harris versus McGang, I think, is the most important. McGang leads the team in points per game for Yale. He gets over 3 assists per game. He's going to take a lot of threes, like I talked about. Versus DeJuan, you're worried about that defensively. Meanwhile, at the other end, McGang, really good defender. How much pressure are you going to cause on DeJuan Harris? And we've seen KU be so much better when DeJuan can score and when he's aggressive. Is that going to be tougher in this matchup? We're going to finish up players to watch. Hawks that I think can stand out and have a good game. Hawks to soar on this one with Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot thanks to FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets. All you got to do is win your $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. It's that simple. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, including a wide range of options like spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You'll be able to get in on the action with FanDuel for the KU Yale game. And, you look at what some of the like sites like KenPom, for instance, have, because the line isn't officially out yet for FanDuel for the KU game. It'll probably be out by the time you're listening to this, but that usually it's around in line with KenPom, has it at about a 15-point spread. So probably be somewhere around that. So you can get that and plenty others. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, players to watch, Hawks to soar. Players I think can step up and should be able to have big games for KU. The KU wings. Nick Townsend is one of Yale's top wings and 4 men. He plays the 4 a lot. He has the team's worst defensive BPR on Evan Miyakawa. John Poulakidis, who is one of their other wings who plays a ton, good 3-point shooter, he also ranks as a negative in defensive BPR. So both those players do. And both of them play the kind of majority of the minutes there. They'll have some other guys eat up, some minutes at the 3 and 4 and on the wing for them, but those guys play a lot of minutes. That means there are a lot of time out there where, yes, they're good offensive players, but you should be able to have an advantage. And without Furphy, the players I'd classify here for that should be able to eat for KU: Kevin McCullough, KJ Adams, and dare I say Nick Timberlake, going back to the idea of maybe a little bit of a longer leash, maybe mentally that helps in this game. And also, maybe you should have that advantage on what they have personnel wise. The other one might be Hunter Dickinson, even though he's being guarded by a 7-footer. If this is a half court game, you're playing a team that gives up 19.5 shots per game at the rim. Out of comparison, KU's given up 13.8 shots per game at the rim, and KU's playing at a much faster rate. So you're going to get a lot of opportunities there. And if you do, okay, you should produce because you're getting a lot of opportunities and you're good. But honestly, KJ Adams is the one that I'm circling the most that should be able to have a big offensive game. He's kind of looking at, maybe FanDuel props over under on points there for KJ. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast. Like and subscribe to us on our YouTube page. We'll be back later this weekend to recap the KU Yale game, maybe some more KU football news. We'll be back early next week, get you a KU Guaranteed Rate Bowl preview with the game against UNLV. So catch you then. This has been LOJ. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your weekend. Merry Christmas.